All right. Good afternoon, everybody. With me today is Josh from Summit. Josh and I have been very good friends from a long time, and Josh is an incredible founder located in Canada as well. So it's nice to have a neighbor on the show. Josh, why are you sitting in a seat that you are in today?
Hey, Emil, and thanks for having me. It's great to catch up in this setting, and congrats again on all the success that you've had with Vendor PM. So
Thank you.
my journey really started. I mean, I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia. I've lived there, or I did live there pretty much my whole life. I went to UBC. I thought I wanted to become a lawyer, funny enough. So I was studying for the LSAT, graduated university, and then I just so happened to get a job at an insurance company that was based out of New York. I wanted to just use it as sort of a 1 or 2 year gateway for me getting back into law school. But yeah, I've been in it ever since. So fast forward 10 years, I'm still in it. So clearly I liked it, but I just saw there was so much opportunity in the industry. It wasn't an industry I ever thought about. And particularly when it came to the tech side. So I had a side business at the time that I started a couple of years after I graduated that was automating applications between brokers and underwriters. And then that snowballed into me joining a very early stage startup called Apollo Insurance, which was a digital wholesaler. So we turned brokers' websites into Shopify style sort of e-commerce stores. And fast forward to today, I don't need to sort of belabor the journey, but 3 years ago founded Summit. So we're a tech-enabled commercial insurance provider across Canada, and it's been quite the journey. And yeah, happy to sort of just jump in and see where this conversation takes us.
You got it. And of course, the insurance element is incredibly relevant to vendor PM, given that when it comes to our vendor onboarding and credentialing module, certificates of an insurance are almost always a universal requirement across all of the management companies we work with. So that's where a lot of the overlap between Summit and vendor PM takes place. And as exciting as the world of insurance is, I think a lot of people tune into Voices of PropTech who understand more about the human side of whether it's being a founder, the prop tech side of things, whether it's being a buyer or a CIO or an industry leader, an executive, a tech executive. And so let's focus on the human side of things for a little bit. What would we need to understand about you as a person and sort of the life and journey that you've had to understand who you are today? What are some of the key building blocks that have brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, I've always been a big sports guy. I played a lot of the different sports growing up, and I think that framed around, how I go about building the business. I think, when you're building a team, it's a subset of people at the end of the day, and you need to make sure that everyone's cohesive, aligned. You have a core mission, you have a coach. Sometimes it's a player coach if it's smaller teams. So all of those have transitioned to the sort of how I view my work life. But beyond that, yeah, I got a family. I have a newborn daughter that just came into the world about 4 months ago. So that's been a big change for me and definitely reframed how I think about, my life as a whole and the balance between work and business, but still sort of in it pretty thick day to day. It's always a balance and a challenge to manage the family and the work life.
So I'm not quite at that stage yet. And congratulations, that's fantastic news. I've always looked at some of my staff, my team members that are running large teams. They have a newborn, they have two young kids, three young kids in some cases. And I'm baffled. I'm like, how are you balancing everything that is a startup and a company that's growing as quickly as Vendor PM with, of course, technically a little startup at home that they're building and growing as well. I'd love to hear more about that. Selfishly, that's something that I'm always curious about. You hit on something that I'm also very interested in. You said that it started to change your perspective of how you sort of view the whole big picture between work and life and that balance. So how what are some of those specific learnings or takeaways that you've started to reflect on?
I'll preface it by saying I wish I had the perfect answer for how to balance the work and business life, but I'm still learning as I go. I'm only 4 months into it, so I still have a long list of things that I need to sort of figure out. But it's been a great change, yeah, and I think it reframed the way that I view life. In the sense that a lot of my identity has been tied to what I do at work and professionally,
Mhm.
and I think it definitely has reframed, how I view myself and my own identity. Obviously, now I'm dad, so you have a newborn daughter. She doesn't know that Summit exists. She doesn't know, what I've done as much as I care about it. And it's important to me. And I think it's just focusing on, what's important to other people. And it definitely reframes, what the priorities are and just finding that balance. But yeah, a lot of sleepless nights. So, just trying to figure out the sleep situation first.
Okay, interesting. And the summit journey has been about a 3-year journey. Is that correct?
Yeah, just over 3 years.
Okay. What would you say is the number one misconception that you had going into Summit, starting Summit, relative to what you know now? And I asked that because then I can share, after I hear your side of things, I could share some of the thoughts from my end. I was really ignorant going into this. I do wish that somebody sat me down and said, this is what you're in for. If you're taking venture capital money, if you're planning to grow a business at this size and this scale, and you want to have clients like the ones we do, to like the amount of responsibility and commitment and everything that comes with it. I'm sure, like, yeah, of course, you just assume logically that's the case, but I wish I had someone who had been there and done that to sit me down and say, this is what you're signing up for. Would I have done things differently? Likely not, but I would have at least liked to know what I was heading towards. So, yeah, what are some of those misconceptions that you realized as you started to go through this journey?
Yeah, and I can sort of frame it as well. Before I started Summit, I was a very early employee at a fast growing startup in Vancouver that was essentially a tech company. We were an insurance company, but we were more focused on the tech side of things. And I found that very thrilling. When I joined the startup, startups at that point in time, it's kind of like a sexy thing. You join, you're part of an early team, but when you're really in the thick of it, all of a sudden you realize that 90% of the time you're not having as much fun as you thought you might be. And what I mean by that is that it's not to say that that's a bad thing. It's just reframing how you view building a business and all of the pain that comes along the way with that. And I think that I was there for 3 years. We grew from, 5 to over 100 full-time staff, had a pretty big team at that point, a lot of customers. So I learned a lot throughout that journey. So I wasn't going into founding Summit having no idea of what that experience would look like. In fact, maybe I was even a little bit jaded, and I wanted to build Summit to be more of sort of I would say like a lifestyle business, a smaller business that wasn't going to turn into, a large national brand, is sort of the path
Hmm.
that we're on right now. But I guess all that learning sort of just made me realize, hey, I have the skills now to understand, where I can look out for pitfalls. What do I avoid? Who do I avoid hiring? What is the role design of these specific individuals that I'm bringing in? But yeah, the number one thing that I've sort of learned throughout the journey is I would have thought that being at an early stage company got me prepared for it, but there's nothing really that can prepare you, obviously, for starting your own business and scaling up and raising venture capital. You just have to have a big tolerance for pain. I kind of joke about it. There's a threshold for pain the earlier you join a company, whether you're the founder, the first employee, the first five. But you join a company at 100, 1,000 people, you probably don't have to deal with as much as the people that joined before you. So that's been a big learning, is just how to kind of understand that, day by day, things are going to happen. Good things are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. But you just got to roll with the punches and figure it out, because that's really what building a business really is.
What's that Elon Musk quote? That there, as you were saying that, there was that quote that just rang in my head. It was, um, starting a company, specifically a tech company, is like chewing glass and staring into the abyss and learning to love the taste of your own blood, or something sick and twisted like that.
It
But
was,
I
yeah.
you know what I'm talking about, right?
Definitely, yeah, and you would know that better than I have, because we don't even consider ourselves a true tech company. We're a tech-enabled company, so we build spot solutions internally. At the end of the day, we're more of an insurance provider, and so I'm sure that you've probably had to deal with even more pain than we have. So yeah, I could probably take a few lessons from you along the way too.
I think I appreciate that, but um, I do think it's entirely transferable. The things that you're saying, the things I've experienced. Well, first of all, it's interesting. Like, you talk about how you need to be able to have a very high tolerance for pain. And I agree with you. The outside world sees the great LinkedIn updates and this fundraising round and this client announcement and this milestone. And like, that's the 5%. But they don't see the 95% of pain and suffering that goes into that. And that's what a startup is like. It's like just grind, head down, like in some cases, pain and suffering 95% of the time. And the only thing that sustains you is when you get those massive wins. It's like that hit of adrenaline and endorphins and everything that carry you through to be able to do the 95% all over again, to have that 5% peak again. And I remember specifically in the first year, but even the first few months or quarters of Vendor PM. See, we started at the very end of 2019, and we were working out of our first investor's office as of January 1st in 2020. And we were working in that office for only a few months before we all know what happened on March 15th. Anyway, in those few months when I was working with him, he watched the emotional roller coaster that we went through. And it's the same emotional roller coaster that you went through and probably still, we're all still going through. And he watched me get so excited when I got a meeting with a massive client or I signed like my first deal, my second deal, my third deal. Like watch me go on these highs, and then something would break with the code or whatever, and then I would just go down this massive low. And he's like, listen, starting a company and building a company is going to be the biggest emotional roller coaster. And you're at the early stages, and so not only are the peaks and valleys very close together in proximity, but the range is incredibly high and low. And what you'll come to understand, whether it's just as a result of the pain numbing itself over time, or you just become a better leader, is that nothing is as good as it seems and nothing is as bad as it seems. And while I understood that advice conceptually and I tried my best to apply it practically, it was only through the many ups and downs that I could start to really apply that advice, and it started to ring incredibly true. I'm like, yeah, you're right. This is great, but tomorrow something might happen, and maybe that's not going to be so great. And it's just like kind of need to maintain a much more leveled range of peaks and valleys. Nothing is as good as it seems. Nothing is as bad as it seems. And the more you go on, the more you build the business, you start to see that. And so I'm sure that's something that you probably seen as you continue through.
Yeah, and I mean, starting a company now, we're 35 full-time people now, so that's in the last 3 years. But obviously, fast rewinding 3 years, we were two people, me and Davis, who is my co-founder.
Hmm.
And when you're making those first two or three hires, like that's where the pain comes in, because if someone doesn't work out, or things, you don't hit the targets you thought you would at that very early stage. The risk associated with that and the stress associated that it's a lot different than even a 10 or 20 or 30-person company. So yeah, those early days, it's just, I thought working at a startup where, I was one of the earliest employees, I was already sort of in the position where that wouldn't phase me. But, there is still a big difference between working for even a startup that's 10 people and a startup where, you're the first or the second employee, or you're the founder. So, yeah, fortunately, we were able to, survive that phase. And I think that's what a lot of startup is just, surviving long enough that you can make an impact and actually execute on the vision. But you're going to have to, overcome obstacles along the way that you just can't predict.
I think it's YC's number one rule is don't die. Like it's
Yeah.
just survive long enough to win. You mentioned Davis. Do you think you could have done this on your own?
Definitely not. No. I mean, I probably could start a different type of business on my own, but we have very different skill sets. We're very similar people, but we add values in different way to the business. And yeah, definitely, we've both said to each other, like, that's one thing is I think, I respect founders who do it 100% solo at the beginning, because talking about pain, I couldn't imagine how much more painful it would be if you didn't have someone that you could just talk to after work. And it's almost like a therapy thing where you just need to communicate with each other and understand, hey, we're both in this together. We're both feeling the same thing. And it's just nice to have someone along the way who understands the journey from the very beginning. So yeah, that's where I have a lot of respect for people who did that on their own, because I don't know how they would be able to do that, but a lot manage it.
The number one reason that startups fail is typically co-founder issues, whatever you want to quantify or define that as. It's co-founder issues. So again, I've been very fortunate. It sounds like you've been very fortunate. What makes your your marriage in the office work? Like, why are you and Davis the right team?
I think it's a lot of things. So just trying to boil it down, I think communication and just respect for each other. I think, we respect each other as professionals, as individuals. We had the luxury of actually working together previously. So I know
Mm.
not all co-founders have that luxury, but we had already had a professional relationship in addition to our friendship. So I think that was a really big sort of obstacle we never had to overcome, because I knew Davis was, a killer. He knew I'm a killer. Like, we knew that we could do this. It wasn't a function of like us not getting along. It was just, can we hire the next person? And can we hire the next person? And can we
Mm.
execute on this? But, that's sort of the challenge, is that, yeah, I couldn't imagine how tough it would be if you had conflict with your founder, especially at the early stage. Like you said, that's where most businesses fail. And I actually had a previous startup where I'm still friends with the co-founders to this day, but we just didn't see eye to eye on things, and then we essentially dissolved the company before it ever got off the ground. And that was actually what prompted me joining Apollo Insurance at an early stage, because I just wanted to join an early stage company, and I was like, hey, I think I still have a few more skills to build here, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to build those skills by building my own company. Like, I need to go back and just learn more. So I think I framed myself as going into joining an early stage startup, not because I wanted to make a ton of money, not because I wanted to, you know, manage a bunch of people or have like a high level of responsibility. It was just because I actually just wanted to learn. Like, I just wanted to build those skills, because I always did want to start my own company. And that's kind of the path that ended up happening. But it wasn't a straight line, that's for sure, when I was at the previous firm either.
Have you ever truly reflected on why you wanted to start your own company? And the reason I frame the question the way that I did is, a lot of people might say that they want to be their full creative self without limitation. They want the freedom, whatever it might be. I think that to some degree is true, but I think that's also to some degree a load of bullshit. And I think that if people really dig deep, they can find the true answers as to why. Because it's only, a unique set of individuals that can truly tolerate what it takes and then execute and succeed at that. So anyway, all to say, have you really sat down and reflected on the answer to that question?
I probably should more, but I think the why for me was it was sort of out of necessity. Like I didn't feel like that there's anything left for me to accomplish at my previous firm. I didn't feel that I was going to be fulfilled working for a large company or joining a later stage company. So the only two options were join another company and be one of the first employees there and help scale it up and do the exact same thing that I did for the last 3 years, or just start my own company and let's kind of just see how that goes. Because I wouldn't have said I'm the type of individual. You have these entrepreneurs that are like, yeah, I was selling X, Y, and Z out of my locker, and like I had a store in my home that I sold to my siblings, and I was an entrepreneur from birth. Like that's actually not me. I feel I'm entrepreneurial, but I wasn't like, the born entrepreneur. I would say it was more just I saw an opportunity. I didn't feel like that there was anything left for me to accomplish outside of doing this. And that was kind of what created the why. It was just like necessity. Like this is the only thing I feel like I want to do right now is build this business. I don't know.
So when you say that you weren't, or you didn't think that you get the fulfillment you desired at another company, early stage, late stage, whatever it is, and then this is where you get it. Like, A, have you obtained that? And B, what does fulfillment actually look like for you? Like, what is fulfillment that you're able to achieve here that you can't achieve elsewhere?
Yeah, I think it's one of our core values at Summit is impact. And I felt at a big company, I just wouldn't make as big of an impact in the day-to-day operations. And I had worked for a big company previous to joining Apollo. So I'd already been through that experience. And, I'd see people sitting around me that had been sitting in the same cubicle for 20 years that are doing the exact same thing that they were doing 10 years ago. And that's just not me. Like I like to learn new things. I like to try new things. I like to experiment. And I think it's one of those things where maybe the skills that I had that maybe I didn't even fully appreciate translated very well into building a business. And it came apparent to me like when I sort of hit the crossroads at my previous company where I was like, hey, there's just not that much left for me to accomplish here. I think the company is in a good spot. I think you guys can continue to grow. I think you can scale the company up. But I'm more of a builder. And I think that, the path that they were on was more sustaining and growing what they had already built, but not tackling new projects. And so maybe I just have ADD or something. I just like to be trying new things all the time. And a big problem for us is, or for me, is just like, I try to get better at saying no because, a big part of being efficient is like you got to say no to things too. So
Yeah.
that's a skill I'm always working on. But what was the why for you? Like, why did you start Vendor PM from a personal perspective? Like, not,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
The interesting thing is that it's evolved quite a bit over time. So I started my first business in high school with Dylan, my co-founder. We were 14 years old, going door to door selling window cleaning. I'd grown that business, exited that business. I started working for a high-rise window cleaning company. I did that for 2 years. It's how I got a lot of exposure to the world of property management. And in that, I was obviously working for somebody else. And maybe it's just because again, since 14, I'd always been doing my own thing. Um, I found it really hard. I just found in myself to be not limited in the sense of I can do this and I can't do that. It was just like limited in terms of like what can be achieved. And I didn't, to me, the idea of an input not having an equal output or a greater output was kind of bothersome. Like if I'm going to input time, energy, money into something, I want to maximize the outcome of that. Right? Like if you're going to the gym, let's just use that as an easy example. You can go to the gym and spend an hour, right? And you can get one outcome, or you can go to the gym, optimize everything you're doing in the gym and get a very different outcome for that hour that you input, but the input is the same. It's an hour, right? So it's really just maximizing the inputs to outputs. And in the sense I've been spending my entire working career in this industry, it was also one of those things that was just like obvious and incredibly frustrating. I'm like, It's very obvious to me that this is a broken system and that it needs to be solved. And it was incredibly frustrating to me that nobody was solving it. And so it was like, I don't know how to explain it. It just wasn't a decision. It was like, it was just, this is what you're doing now. Now, when I did mention that my why has shifted over the years through vendor PM, and I know this might sound a little cliche, but it's 100% genuine and honest. There's a lot of people that took a huge risk on us. And to your point, you mentioned this earlier, the earlier that somebody has entered the business, the greater the risk that they take, right? And the more that they're subjecting themselves to the pain, difficulties, and so on. And that's not just true for employees. I mean, listen, there's people that invested in vendor PM before there was a single dollar of revenue. That's incredibly risky. There's people that joined the company as employees before there was a single dollar of revenue. And again, as that journey has gone on, there's been so many people that have invested a lot of money and a lot of their time. And I feel a deep obligation to do right by those people. Those that have trusted me and our team with their time and their money, there's just this obligation to wake up every morning and ensure they get the best possible return for their investment and their time. So that's where my why has shifted over the years. And listen, you've got 35 full-time employees. That's a lot of people. You raised capital, if I'm not mistaken. Like, I'm sure you feel the same obligation to some extent.
Absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, at the beginning, your motivations when you're starting the company, for me, it was very similar. I had a very clear vision of where I see the insurance industry going, where I see the intersection of insurance technology and prop tech, for example, like how we sort of can work with prop tech companies, integrations, et cetera. But that clear vision remains the same. Obviously, things have changed when you grow and you build a business and you have employees and you have people and you have investors, and the level of responsibility now, it definitely can weigh on you. And even going back to the early days, we also raised money before we had a single dollar of revenue from a few friends, family, angel investors. And one of those early investors actually were a couple family members. And that
Mm.
made me actually feel very uncomfortable, if I'm being honest. But they were like, don't tell me what to do with my money. This is my money. You can't say no. If I want to invest, I should get the same opportunity as like other people you're talking to. And I'm like, well, that's very fair. Like, I can't, I'm not going to say no. It's just, now all of a sudden you have this sort of personal connection and responsibility, not only to investors that are professionals that do this for a living, but, people that you have a very personal family relationship with. That definitely added another layer of stress to the mix. Obviously, things have worked out, and everyone's done really well at this point. But definitely had a few sleepless nights thinking, like, yeah, if this doesn't work out, then how is that family dinner going to go next year? And is it just going to be a tough
Yeah.
relationship?
Yeah. It's so funny you say that. It was actually funny if my mom had asked the same thing. I said no. I'm like, there's no world where I'm letting you do that. It's just like I
I was
just
I was
didn't
softer
want
than you,
added.
clearly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask you. And again, if this is, you can say pass if this is just too confidential. But have any of those early family members exited any of their investments or their positions?
We have had the opportunity to create liquidity for some of those early investors. Yeah. So no one has fully exited the business. And in fact, no one really wanted to, but I think it was one of those conversations where you say, hey, we've done very well so far. So that was actually a really awesome moment. Like that felt great.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So, in that sense, it actually, was probably one of the best feelings that I've ever had. But going back to the early stage, you have that pain and you're just thinking like, I'm just going to make this pain even more painful because not only am I, going to be building a business that has the potential to fail. Like we were always objective. Like there's an entrepreneurs that talk about, and people just found businesses that say like, I've talked to them. They say, I'm like, have you ever thought about, the business like potentially failing or, not working out? And they're like, no, that's never
No,
crossed my mind ever.
it hasn't. No, it's correct. It shouldn't.
Yeah, no, it's never crossed my mind. But if you look at the statistics, statistically, most businesses fail. So that was where I always felt conviction. I always felt 100% confident. But at the same time, there is a risk. Like, there's macro factors. You never know what can happen. Obviously, we see, the state the world's in today. So there's just certain things that are unpredictable. And like, as good of a job as he could do as a founder, he could execute perfectly, but things might just not work out. And that's just the risk you take. So that was what made me feel uncomfortable. It's not because I didn't feel like I could execute and fulfill, on my core responsibilities, but just more that there is an intrinsic risk in investing in a business that has no revenue, especially when they're a family member.
Yep. Yeah, listen,
Yeah.
there's two things to pull out of there. One is my favorite book, not just in a professional or business context, but all time is Good to Great. And I believe one of the principles in Good to Great was the ability to have 100% complete conviction on the outcome that you're working towards, knowing that you're going to succeed, while simultaneously facing the brutal facts in 100% reality and honesty. And it's almost this paradoxical like duality that is very difficult to maintain. But if you're able to do so, you A are operating in reality with the real facts, and B, you're taking that information and then doing everything possible because you're 100% relentlessly committed to achieving the outcome that you're desiring. So that kind of the way that you explained it, I think that that sort of quote or that saying sums it up really well. But I'm really happy that you answered that question the way you did about if any of them were able to exit all or part of their position. I remember some of the very early investors in Vendor PM and our Series A exited part of their position, and it was that's how I know what my why is because that was the best feeling I've had throughout this entire journey. And these are like to your point, these aren't people that are doubting, like they're supporting you. They believe that you can do it, but it's like not only getting them like a significant financial return and then being like, I did it. Like, we came through and we did it. Like, you believed in me, you took a huge bet and it paid off. Like there's something really powerful and validating about that. That's again, I think that's what fuels so much of my why right now, because imagine the feeling as a founder if you're able to deliver that at scale to all your investors, all your employees, like that must be remarkable, surreal.
It is, yeah. And I mean, we still have a long way to go. So this was yeah, for sort of like very, very early friends and family, people who like essentially just believed in us, obviously. Like there was no operating business at the time. But I'm looking forward to the day where, we can do that for more people. We can do that for the employees. We can do that for everyone else who's participated. We have investors as well. So, that's the nice part of the business. That's the 1% that, you wake up in the morning and you feel great. But like we were talking about before, those days don't come around very often. So I feel like you have to soak them in, and you have to really appreciate the moment and what you've accomplished. So that's something that I'm trying to do a bit more of. But at the same time, I'm just go, go, go. So I just want to focus on the future and, the next 3, 5 years and what we can accomplish in the industry.
Yeah, and it makes it all worth it. Okay, so the next 3 to 5 years, let's talk about that. And this wouldn't be a tech podcast in mid 2025 if we didn't talk about AI. So, what does AI in the world of insurance look like today and over the coming years?
Yeah, AI and insurance is like AI and any other sort of vertical business where, there's a lot of implications. I would say it would be similar to, other industries where we're looking at AI from a perspective of how can we automate a lot of those low value tasks, like a lot of the service functions of our business. How can we automate, picking up the phone and getting back to leads a lot quicker because we get a lot of inbound calls and there's just so many places that a human being can be at a time, whereas an AI agent could be having 30 conversations at the exact same time and qualifying opportunities and triaging those for our brokers. So, that would be one, would be triaging opportunities, customer service. But one area that we're diving more into at Summit recently, because for some context, we're tech enabled commercial broker. So we're what's called a retail broker. So, we're like the first person that people talk to when they go to buy insurance. But obviously, there's underwriters and insurance companies in the background. So we collect the information, we shop it out to the insurance companies, and then we get back terms and provide those to the customers. And we do that leveraging technology internally. But when it comes to AI, there's a lot of AI that I think AI is going to have a huge impact on underwriting, to be honest. I think that, there's a lot of products out there that have relatively complex, but not impossible underwriting that can be accomplished by AI. And I think that's the biggest challenge the insurance industry has had over the last 10 years, because I felt like that we should have been way farther ahead as an industry, given all the advancements we've had in technology, all the SaaS solutions out there, et cetera. But we're still doing business very traditionally. Like we're still collecting information, asking 50 questions, making people wait as an industry as a whole is what I mean, multiple weeks to get a quote. And that's because a lot of the rating algorithms and a lot of the pricing matrices of what people use on the back end, it's very human input driven. And we've been able to actually build certain insurance products just in the last week that would have previously 5 years at Apollo taken us multiple weeks to build, but one person can do that leveraging AI in a matter of hours. So I think that, when you're thinking about like simple underwriting for like a small business, a contractor, a vendor that's doing, 100,000 a year in revenue and their policy is $2,000, like I think AI is going to have a huge impact in that segment. And I'm really excited to see where it goes and how we can tap into that.
So pretend that I'm a customer or a prospect and you're pitching me the vision for the future. Like what does like let's talk in more like conceptual but practical examples and less theoretical. So yeah, what like paint a picture of the future a year from now at Summit, assuming that I'm a prospect.
Yeah, I think that the future multiple years from now and hopefully sooner than that would be that, if you're a customer and you're looking for an insurance quote for your business, whether you're a small, medium enterprise or whether you're middle market, you're dealing with an AI agent at the forefront. It's collecting that application information. You're using voice to communicate with them, or you can type it via a prompt, give them the information they need. They can give you indications on exactly what you would be looking at roughly from a pricing perspective. And then if you feel comfortable taking that next step, then you're going to talk to an actual human broker who's going to place the policy for you and make sure that everything is locked in and exactly what you need. But right now, we are still doing things very, very traditionally. We're asking people to submit spreadsheets that have like 1,000 lines, going back and forth a ton. And I just think that, if someone had their own personal like liaison throughout that process that was able to touch every single customer, i.e., like an AI agent that's sitting over top of our whole database, that would be the future for me. It's just, I think AI is going to be transformative for the insurance industry. I've started using ChatGPT more than ever. Like I'm using it more than I've ever used it. And for me, it's just, understanding the power that AI has. I don't fully even comprehend it yet. So I can't predict the future, but I do think it's going to change the industry dramatically. And I think that we at Summit are very well positioned for that because we're leveraging systems that most insurance brokers don't use. And one very rudimentary example would be like we use HubSpot as our CRM system. Most insurance brokerages don't even have a CRM system. So if you can leverage HubSpot and then you can apply AI applications over top of that, obviously you're going to provide a better customer experience to the end consumer than if you're working off of proprietary legacy software and trying to build everything in-house. I just don't think the in-house build process is going to be the same as it is.
I have to agree. Okay, let's close this one out. One more question for you. Your daughter's 25 years old now. She's coming to you saying, Dad, I'm going to start a company. What is the single most important piece of advice that you are going to give her being an entrepreneur wanting to go and start her own business?
Well, probably the first thing I would say is don't do it and just get experience working for another company. That's honestly what I would say. I would just say don't do it. And I genuinely mean that. And the reason behind is that people who are going to start a business, they're not going to listen to people say don't do it. So I'm going to just tell her to not do it. And if she does it, I'm going to support her every step of the way and get involved and, help her out. But I think that's the first test you have to pass is that you really have to want to do it on your own.
Incredible. Very, very good answer. Josh, you're awesome. What you're building is incredible. Where should people go if they want to find out more about Summit and the products and services that you offer?
Yeah, we have a very good LinkedIn presence. So that would probably be the number one way to follow us. We post multiple times a week. We have newsletters that go out consistently. And then if you're an actual business owner that's looking for insurance options, you can reach out to us through our website. We have a lot of different products that you can access. And we also have Twitter, we have Instagram, we have all the sort of other social medias. But I would say LinkedIn and our website are the two best ways.
Amazing, man. Awesome. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Emil. One last question for you. If and when you do have a child in the future, what advice
Yes.
would you give them if they were going to start a business?
You can't beat somebody that never gives up. Words to live by, in my opinion.
Got to survive. Yeah.
It's not dissimilar to the YC don't die, but I think that it can be interpreted in many different ways, right? Like for me, don't die is like, okay, just preserve your cash. To me that kind of I get this like defense connotation to it where it's like you can't beat someone that never gives up. It's like more of this like offensive connotation where I will bash through every brick wall and I will bash through every brick wall if I need to get where we have to go. It's just sort of this like relentless pursuit. And listen, to some point, to some degree, I think it requires the right person. So depending on the person, maybe the advice is don't do it. But if you think that, this person might have what it takes, then yeah, the advice is you can't beat somebody that never gives up.
That's a good note to end it on. Yeah, I like it.
Yes,
I'll
sir.
probably pull that one out as the second answer. So I'll say don't do it, and then I'll steal your line.
Yeah, you and me both. Awesome, man. Have a wonderful day. Appreciate the time, and we'll see you soon.
See you, Emil. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.